Okay, let's move forwards. AI automation knowledge sharing section. So today we've got a show and tell from Rob Clark, and Rob's going to be showing how he's been experimenting with AI for one or two of his clients. Now, I find this quite funny. When I was asking on the WhatsApp group a couple of weeks ago if anyone would like to do a show and tell, Rob sent me a private message saying, I'm not ready to present anything, but which I took as it would be great if you did present this in its raw form, Rob. So I basically strong-armed him into doing it anyway, because I just thought it'd be really interesting to do it, not knowing exactly what the end result is going to be, etc. So that's where we're at. I'm keen to see what you're going to share, Rob. If you can, yeah, talk us through why you started looking at it, what the business needed. It would be great just to see what opportunity you found to start introducing AI into that particular workflow. So, Rob, over to you.
Yeah, so it ties back to really some points you made just earlier, Graham, about low-hanging fruit, really. And in an organisation, there are a lot of tasks that take a lot of man time or personnel time. And for one of my clients, Quality.org, who I believe Andrew Lannon is a member of this group, I was dealing with their team about a content audit. Now, if I'll share my screen in a moment, but if you look at Quality.org's website, they're a charity by royal charter that's been going for over 100 years, and they are the go-to place if you're a quality professional. You could be an engineer, you could be in nuclear, you could be in civil planning, but you may hold a qualification in quality and you want to get certified. So they produce a lot of thought pieces, a lot of articles, and their current website hasn't been rebuilt since 2015, and it's got content going, articles, news articles, going back to around 2011, 2012. And there's about 3,200 pieces of content on there that needs to be reviewed. And it needs to be reviewed from a number of points. It needs to be reviewed. Is the content still relevant? Is it up to date? Is it providing any benefit on the site from a search engine point of view, from the clients looking at it? And is there anything that needs correcting on some of these articles? So, should we go and update them? Is there out-of-date content on there? Now, for a person to go and do that, look at those 3,200 articles and spend, say, 3 minutes per article reading it, looking at the page, which may have PDF attachments, may have video attachments. You're talking, if you said 3 minutes a page and you did it consistently, you'd be looking at 20 man days just to review every one of those pages. And that's without actually doing anything. So should we keep it? Should we redirect it? So we had a discussion and thought, well, could we use AI to make that task a little bit easier? From a day-to-day point of view, non-programmers, could they, write a prompt? And it came back to your prompt engineering demo you did, Graham, on how you're improving your efficiencies with the actual cohort management. That made me think, well, actually, surely we can write a prompt to look at these articles. But then it threw a few problems up itself, and we sort of looked at 3 or 4 different AI engines. So Gemini was obviously one, ChatGPT. We looked at a Chinese one called Qwen, and we looked at Perplexity. And what we found is that all the free versions, most of them were restricted and wouldn't actually browse the internet. So we couldn't just simply, upload a CSV that had several fields, including URL, page title, content, a certain description, when it was last published, etc. Uploaded that, and what we found was we're getting a big difference in results based off what the actual bots could access. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that. It's work in progress. We've got some next steps in place, but just share how, from a practical point of view, this can help your business, and also some other more simplified ways. We've got an example where one of my other clients, Unity Insurance Services, they write regular blogs and news articles for the insurance industry, and just simple things like choosing an image to accompany a news article so that you're not using the same stock image as every other insurance company out there. Using AI to do that, we've found to be incredibly efficient. And so I'll just share my screen now and show you some bits. And please, anyone, just jump in. This is pretty laid back. I'm just going to share a few tabs in chat. If you've got any questions, just jump in. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. It might be
Yeah,
a
no,
little...
yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So this is the quality.org site I mentioned about. And
Oh, hang on, Rob. We can see your meeting screen, not the browser.
okay. What I'm worried about is my resolution. I'm on a 5K monitor. It might be a bit big. Can everyone see that now?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. So this is the quality.org website I'm talking about. And I have this view here where you can see there's 3,239 results. And this was all the data that I dumped out for the actual bots. So I had the page title, the type of article, what section it was in, the topic, the URL, and when it was, you know, last updated, and when its actual publish date was. And then I, you know, to give you an idea of what one of the articles are like. So this is one going back to 2014. Here's a typical article, and it may have attachments like this PDF in here as well. And that content would also have to be reviewed, you know, to the relevance of the audience, etc. Okay. Another article here from 2012, you know, how much quality management's worth in the UK. Now, you know, all these sorts of articles within the site give a depth of content, they link through to other areas of the site, but they may not be relevant anymore, or maybe providing little value to the SEO point of view. So what we did is we wrote a prompt, and that prompt I've got here, and I upload a sample from the CSV. So I just put initially 50 URLs in there, and we gave it the URL, the page title, topic, sector, publish date, last updated, and then we gave it some background about the actual site and what we wanted to do, and then we gave the chatbot some instructions. So we either want to archive the content, keep the content published, or review and refresh the content on the page. Now, if we wanted to archive the content, we then asked it to look at the site and say, where should we redirect that page to from an SEO point of view? And then also, if it thought we should refresh and review it, we've asked it to put actual practical comments about what we should do to improve that article. And then we asked it to pump the CSV back to us, but then add in a recommendation and note section. Then gave some background about quality.org, who they were. So then you can see here, Gemini showed its thinking, and then showed what it was going to do, and it gave some examples, and it popped back quite quickly. But what we found was with Gemini, it couldn't directly browse web pages, as it's saying here, and there's a number of reasons for that, but it could use its own search index, which was very helpful. So Google's obviously indexed a lot of these pages already, so that it then could actually find information. So one of the advantages of Google's bot, and probably with ChatGPT and Bing, having Bing as a search engine, they could do similar things. When we actually looked at our traffic that was hitting the site in Cloudflare, can everyone see my screen here with Cloudflare on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We could actually see the different bots that were hitting our site. And when I ran the actual Gemini and also the Google AI Studio, no traffic from their bots hit the site at all at the time, where ChatGPT did, but only when we used Copilot. So you can see here the ChatGPT user, and the end results we got actually were the best from ChatGPT's Copilot. I'll show you that in a second. So here was the original CSV I uploaded, and here's one that Quen jumped out to us, and it come back with the recommendations here: keep content as published, and then occasionally gave some notes. Google was much better and gave a lot better details in the notes, but still not as good as ChatGPT. So if you have a look at this screenshot here, some of the recommendations we've got were really in depth. So where you look at refresh the content here for this article, it actually described what the article is talking about, but actually saying, let's find some real world examples and case studies to illustrate the cultural nuances. So it was tying back to the article, which was really helpful. You could then go further and maybe instruct the prompt to then write those sort of answers for you. But as an initial beta test, we found it really useful that it could quite quickly come back, scan those 3,200 articles with a paid subscription. It was heavily handicapped on the free versions. But with the paid APIs, it come back within sort of half an hour with all the results that we could then use a human to just triage and look at the ones that actually required a review and refresh. So instead of having 3,200 articles in, we've sort of pulled it down to 400 articles that need to be looked at. So from a time-saving perspective, we feel this is going to work well. The next step for us is we've got some licenses with Perplexity AI and with Google's AI Studio, and we're going to tie the API directly into the website so it can access the database and hopefully give us better results, and maybe even temporarily give us a draft version of the article that someone could actually go through and then approve to publish. Do we have any questions or thoughts on how we could maybe do this better? The objective is a large content audit of a site that's been going live for about 15 years. It's got over 3,200 public articles. They've got about another 20,000 articles that are behind a paywall. But it's time to review that content. So we've got articles going back to 2012. Now, having a human sit and read every article, because staff have turned over as well within the business, having a human sit there, read every article, check the relevance manually, and decide whether we keep it, archive it, or redirect it to another page is a huge job. Best case, we worked out 20 man days at 3 minutes an article. At 5 minutes an article, it came up to 33 man days. So by triaging that, we're heavily reducing that 3,200 articles down to less than a sixth. That then people are actually looking at the articles that need to be looked at, because we've got content there dating back to say 2015, 2016, and the actual bot came back telling us why it was still relevant, and it had checked the data in it. So, the statistics were still relevant and things like that. So we're using AI to automate what would be an incredibly labor intensive task for individuals within a team. And it's a charity, the clients, they have a limited number of individuals working within that charity. So any time that we can save them doing things like this is time that they can be better refocused on things like actually rewriting some of those articles or writing newer articles. So it's to speed up a large content order on a large data set, Sharon. And we started with the public facing website because that's the most immediate. We didn't want to lose any of our SEO benefit, but at the same time, I've got 20 odd thousand articles behind a paywall that will also need to be reviewed and triaged and looked at. So this was a test case basically. And what we did at first is used tools that were freely available or didn't require any programming by using prompt engineering to do that initial audit. We've now looked at it and said, this is brilliant. Now let's maybe tie into the API, give it direct access to the database and refine this so that later on through a UI, through the back end of the CMS for end users, they can go in and run those audits periodically and not get to a situation where we're 10 years down the line. We could be proactive where the system's actually flagging to us over time. So that was the idea. Andreas, you've had your hand up for a bit there. We use it for things like meta tagging images as well. So it will actually analyze what the image is about and put descriptions in for accessibility. Perfect. So, there's lots of practical ways, and it comes down to the data sets. We've done this as a test to just triage and make a decision on should content be reviewed by a human, right? Nothing of this is going to be automated except that process of saying, out of your articles, these are the ones you should look at first. These are the ones that are critical, that are really out of date, or this is old, yep, but keep it, and these are the reasons why. So it's just to help with that content management. We want, the next sort of phase, and I've written down a few things. Is the first is to look at, getting the API in and getting it through the back end of the CMS. But second would be to include other data points such as Google Analytics and other data points that can help that prompt give a better result. We did discuss that within the team. One of the challenges, and when we looked at some of the Google Analytics data, is some of the old pages are actually ranking quite well. And because they are the authoritative sort of organization for the quality industry, then people are going to have a lot of old content bookmarked. There's going to be, a lot of search results that are coming up, especially with AI search results with the question and answer sort of approach, that they don't want to just go in with a bit of a sledgehammer approach and say, well, everything that's before that date's that old. They actually want to manually review it all. And we were just looking at a way that maybe we could use AI to triage that, because it was really interesting that actually an article, one of the first results that came back was only from 3 months ago, and the AI told us to review it. And it was because it had actually, when we looked at it, it was a bit of a lazy article in the way it had been written, that somebody had just pulled some content together, but hadn't actually looked at some case studies or some more relevant data to back up what was being said. It was a place filler, so to speak, where some of the older stuff, it was saying, actually, we should keep it. So it was just a triage tool we're looking at. You could still do that because it's being dumped out as a CSV at the moment. So you could still sort it by everything from the last 2 years, for etc. When the human comes to actually looking at those recommendations. But it was better to have the big data set to see how it processed, really.
I just want to call out on this one. Sorry, I'll let you get back to it. But if we were to look at all of the extensions that have come out from this conversation, where you'd have like API integrations, multiple data set, doing things at the edge, like Andreas was talking about, like you'd look at that, and that it would be difficult to get started because there's a certain tariff to actually get it done. Plus, you'll have that kind of sense at the organisation where they'll be thinking, well, we don't actually know how well that's going to work. So it's like I was saying earlier on in the call, I think there's a gateway technology that allowed you guys to start easily and get an inkling that actually that might work really well, and that's now given you license to go and progress from there. And I just think it's confirmation of that. I think that point we made earlier on, which is any business has got to look for that easy first step, prove to themselves that actually, yeah, this tech could be a game changer for us, and then expand out from there. Just that first step's the essential one. So yeah, just wanted to join a couple of those dots. So I will hand back to you now, Rob.
Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm conscious of everyone's time, but I'll just show you some other really simple use cases that us that are a bit more tech focused probably wouldn't think about in day to day, but end users, like in the marketing department, might be writing a blog. I mentioned earlier, need to find an image. So I'll just show you a little example. Screen share again. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, got it.
So Unity Insurance Services is another client we deal with for the Scout Association. They do use what everyone said, they use their blogs quite heavily to write relevant content, and they do rank really well, and their blog does rank really well. But if you have a look here, this buildings and contents insurance blog, their marketing lady wrote this the other day, and she didn't have an image. And that image there and this image here are produced in about 60 seconds using Google's Gemini. And I just wrote this prompt: generate me an image in 16:9 format, at least 2000 pixels wide. Told it the image should accompany a news article about buildings and contents, who the client is, and then I just pasted all the text for the article in there. And it showed you the thinking, and it came back immediately with that first image, which was bang on. And then I asked to refine it a little bit about the pixelation, and then it came back with the second image. And it was just seconds. And, the client hasn't had to go to a third party, image licensing company. They haven't had to pay £20 for the image or use Adobe's licensing credits, but just been able to produce this image, which has worked really well for their news article, and is exactly what the article's about: ensuring equipment for village halls and scout groups and property and equipment. So another example of where we use that was this one here on minibus insurance in the winter. We couldn't find an image that was with a vehicle that looked UK based on the correct side of the road. So we asked AI to do it, and it produced that image for us. So it's just a really simple use case where those 63% of the people in their job that don't think AI is for them could actually utilize it, not have to go to the graphic design team, not have to go to a third party provider and buy stock imagery. And so I just thought I'd share that with you guys as really simple use cases that are probably practical in the day to day for some of your clients.
I really appreciate you sharing that today, because I know, as I said at the top of the session there, and I know at first you're thinking it's not ready for prime time, but I think as was proven by the comments. It was really good to see that go from a thought process to a proof of concept to actually, well, yeah, this is something that works really well. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. That was super valuable. We're 1 minute past the hour. So does anyone have any final thoughts or questions they want to put before we wrap things up?